Hello everyone, welcome to the video lecture of this course finite element method. So this is the continuation of the module introduction where we are having total 8 lectures. So in the first lecture we have discussed the concept of the finite element method and we have seen its historical background. Okay. After that, in the second lecture we have discussed the different numerical methods, then the concept of the elements and nodes, then the concept of degrees of freedom. So all these things have been discussed earlier. Okay, so today we'll be discussing the general steps of the finite element method. While solving a problem of this finite element method, what are the general steps that we follow? So all these things will be discussed in this lecture in details. Okay, so let us start this lecture. So the step 1, it is known as the discretization of structure. So what is this discretization actually? So this discretization is the art of subdividing a structure into a convenient number of smaller elements is known as discretization. That means when a physical problem is given to us or we want to solve a physical problem, then first we need to draw the geometry of that uh, domain, computational domain. Next, in one go we will not try to solve the complex shape geometrical problem. In that case, what we need to do, we need to subdivide or we need to break down that entire shape of the computational domain into convenient number of smaller elements or smaller shapes. Now that one, that means the art of subdividing a complex shape structure into a convenient number of smaller elements so that the numerical simulation will be easier. That process or the procedure, it is known as the discretization of the structure. Now there are these smaller elements are classified as follows. What are this classification? First is the one-dimensional elements, then two-dimensional elements, next three-dimensional elements, and axisymmetric elements. So what are these classification of these smaller elements? These one-dimensional elements, these are like the bar and beam elements. These are actually considered as the one-dimensional elements. So the concept of bar and beam, this is actually known to us. We have studied this in strength of material subject. And the simplest line element, also known as linear element, it is having two nodes, one at each end, which is shown here in this figure 1.2. In case of the bar element, the two different nodes at its two different ends, these are shown here. So this is the example of a one-dimensional element. Next, in case of a two-dimensional element, the triangular and rectangular elements, these are actually considered as two-dimensional element. Now these elements, these are loaded by forces in their own plane. Now in this diagram 1.3, the two-dimensional elements like the triangular and rectangular shapes, these are actually shown here, and here you can see in case of the triangular element there are actually three different nodes at its corner points, and in case of the rectangular elements we are having it four different nodes at its corner points. So these are the examples of the two-dimensional elements and its nodes. Next, we are having the three-dimensional elements. Now, the most common three-dimensional elements are tetrahedral and hexahedral elements. So, these elements, these are used for three-dimensional stress analysis problems. Now, in this diagram, in the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the three-dimensional elements. These are shown here. And the first diagram, it is the tetrahedral element, which is a 3D element, and the second one, it is a hexahedral element. So the corner points, that is the nodes for these three-dimensional elements, these are also shown in this diagram for the tetrahedral and hexahedral elements. And finally we are having the axisymmetric elements. Now the axisymmetric element, this is actually developed by rotating a triangle or quadrilateral about a fixed axis located in the plane of the element through 360 degree. So what is this axisymmetric element? Actually in this diagram we can see this is actually developed by rotating a triangle or a quadrilateral about a fixed axis located in the plane of the element through 360 degree. So in that case we will get the axisymmetric element. Now when the geometry and loading of the problems are axisymmetric, so in that case this type of axisymmetric elements, these are used. So this is the first step of solving any finite element problem. So that is known as the discretization, and 4 different types of elements we have seen here. It is the one-dimensional element, two-dimensional element, three-dimensional element, and axisymmetric elements. So in case of one-dimensional element, we have seen that the bar and beam elements, these are the example of one-dimensional element. Next, in case of two-dimensional element, we have seen the triangular and rectangular shape elements. These are considered as two-dimensional elements. Next, in case of the three-dimensional elements, we have seen that the tetrahedral and hexahedral elements, these are actually the three-dimensional elements. And in case of the axisymmetric element, this type of elements, these are developed by rotating a triangle or quadrilateral about a fixed axis located in the plane of the element through 360 degree. So based on our given problem, in case of the finite element analysis, we will break down the given complex shape into the suitable classification of the elements. Now the step 2, it is the numbering of nodes and elements. The concept of the nodes and elements, this is already discussed. Now how to number these nodes and elements. Now after the first step, that is after the discretization process, the numbering of the nodes and elements, it should be there. Now the numbering process, it is actually most important since it decides the size of the stiffness matrix and it leads the reduction of memory requirement. Now while numbering the nodes, the following condition it should be satisfied. What is that condition? The condition is actually the maximum node number minus minimum node number. This is equals to minimum. So this condition we need to remember, and while numbering the nodes, this condition should be satisfied, which is maximum node number minus minimum node number, this is equals to minimum. So let us discuss this condition with an example. Now in this figure 1.6, this is actually the longer side numbering process. So one rectangular shape, it is taken and the nodes, and it is discretized in nodes and elements. Now here you can see that total 15 number of elements we are having in this rectangular shape, and total number of elements we are having 15, and total number of nodes we are having 24. Now if we consider the element number 3, in that case this 3 number of rectangular shape element, it is having its nodes which are numbered as 3, 4, 10 and 9. Now among these 4 different nodes, the maximum node number, it is equals to 10, the minimum node number, this is equals to 3, and the difference of this maximum node minus minimum node number, this is actually 7. So this is in case of the longer side numbering process. But if we consider the shorter side numbering process, so in that case what will happen? The nodes we are having, this is 24, and the elements we are having, this is 15, but the numbering of the nodes, these are now changed. So it is now a shorter side numbering process, which is clearly visible here. Now again, if we consider the third number element here, then the node numbers, these are changed as 9, 10, 13 and 14. So in that case, now the maximum node number, this is 14, and the minimum node number, this is 9. So the difference is 5 now. So what we understood from here, that if we consider the shorter side numbering process, then the difference of the maximum node number and the minimum node number, this is minimum in case of the shorter side numbering process, which is actually 5, but in case of the longer side numbering process, it was actually 7. So that means what, that the shorter side numbering process, this is followed in the finite element analysis, and it actually reduces the memory requirement, so which is very much needed. Next, the step 3, it is the selection of a displacement function or interpolation function. So this step 3, it actually involves choosing a displacement function within each element. So polynomial of linear, quadratic and cubic form are frequently used as displacement functions because they are simple to work within finite element formulation. Now in this diagram we can see the polynomial approximation in one dimension. These are given in the figure number A. This is the linear approximation, and the figure number B, it is the quadratic approximation. So you can see the deviation in between the exact solution and the approximation. Now the polynomial type of interpolation functions, these are mostly used due to the following reasons. So what are these reasons? These actually, it is easy to formulate and computerize the finite element equations, and again it is easy to perform differentiation or integration. Next, the accuracy of the results can be improved by increasing the order of the polynomial. Now in this earlier diagram, what we have seen here, the polynomial function in case of the linear and quadratic approximation, these were given. Now this phi x, it is considered as a field variable. In the case 1, in case of the linear polynomial, these are the format or the expression or the mathematical expression for the one-dimensional problem, that is the field variable, which is phi x. So in case of the linear polynomial, the one-dimensional problem phi x, this is represented as a naught plus a 1x. Then in case of the two-dimensional problem phi xy, it is a naught plus a 1x plus a 2y. Next, in case of the three-dimensional problem, the field variable, it is phi xyz, so this is equals to a naught plus a 1x plus a 2y plus a 3z. So while solving such type of numerical based on the bar element, we need to remember this mathematical representation of the linear polynomial, whether it is one dimensional or two dimensional or three dimensional. Next, in case of the quadratic polynomial, the mathematical expression of the one dimensional problem, this is a naught plus a 1x plus a 2x square. Next, in case of the two-dimensional problem, this is phi xy, that is the field variable, and the mathematical representation is a naught plus a 1x plus a 2y plus a 3x square plus a 4y square plus a 5xy. And in this similar manner, the three-dimensional problem, in case of this quadratic polynomial, it is written here. So this expression for the 1, 2 and 3 dimensional problem corresponding to linear and quadratic polynomial, we need to remember while solving the finite element method problems analytically. So this was the step number 3 that we have discussed just now. Next, we are having the step number 4. here we need to define the material behavior by using the strain displacement and stress strain relationship. So the concept of stress, strain, all these things for the stress strain relationship, this is actually known to us theoretically, and some mathematical formula is also we have studied. Now this strain displacement and stress strain relationship, these are necessary for deriving the equations for each finite element. In case of one-dimensional deformation, the strain displacement relationship, this is actually represented as E, that is strain equals to du dx. So this E, this is equals to strain, and U, it is the displacement field variable along x direction. Again, the stress strain relationship, this is actually represented as sigma, this is equals to E multiplied by small e. So this sigma, this is the stress in x direction, capital E, this is the modulus of elasticity or Young's modulus, and the small e, this is the strain. So that means this is actually the representation of the Hooke's law that is known to us. That means the stress is proportional to strain within elastic limit, and that constant or the modulus of elasticity and Young's modulus, it is also familiar to us. So here we have seen the mathematical representation of the strain displacement relationship, which is E equals to du dx, and the stress strain relationship, which is sigma equals to Young's modulus into strain. Next we are having the step 5, which is the derivation of element stiffness matrix and equations. The finite element equation in matrix form, it can be represented as this Fe, this is equals to K into U. So this is actually the compact matrix form, and the explanation of this matrix form, it is written here. It is F is actually the vector of the element nodal forces. So these forces, it can be written as F1, F2, F3 dot dot up to Fn. This is equals to the stiffness matrix form, that is K11, K12, K13, then K21, K23, K22, K23. So in the similar manner, Kn1, Kn2 up to dot dot Knn multiplied by the element displacement vector, so which is u1, u2, u3, so dot dot up to un. So this u is the displacement vector. So the compact form, this is actually the Fe equals to Ke into ue. So this e is for the element, so that means F is the vector of element nodal forces, the forces that will be given in the numerical, and some of the forces we need to calculate. Then K is the element stiffness matrix, and U, it is the element displacement vector. So this, based on this formula, some numericals will be discussed in the second module, which is based on the one-dimensional problem. Now this equation, that is F equals to Ku, this can be derived by any of the following methods. So what are those methods? Which is, number one is the direct equilibrium method. So this method is much easier to apply for line or one-dimensional elements. Then number two is the variational method, and this method is most easily adaptable to the determination of element equations for complicated elements. So that means element having large number of degrees of freedom. And the example is like axisymmetric stress element, then plate bending element, and 2 or 3-dimensional solid stress element. So this is the concept of the variational method. Next, number 3, we are having the weighted residual method. So this method, which is also known as, one example of the weighted residual method is Galerkin method. Now this weighted residual method, it is useful for developing the element equations in thermal analysis problems. So they are especially useful when a functional such as potential energy is not readily available. So in this weighted residual method, one example it is given here as Galerkin method. We will solve some numerical based on this Galerkin method and some numericals based on the Rayleigh-Ritz method. So there we will find the concept of the potential energy, strain energy, the different steps to solve problems based on the Rayleigh-Ritz method, then the formula for the Galerkin method. So all these things will be discussed in the next lectures, where we will solve different numericals based on the concept of the Galerkin method and Rayleigh-Ritz method. Next, the step 6, this is assemble the element equations to obtain the global or total equations. Now the individual element equations obtained in step 5, these are added together by using a method of superposition, that is the direction stiffness method. Now the final assembled or the global equation, it is equals to F equals to KU. So where F is the global force vector, K is the global stiffness matrix, and U is the global displacement vector. So this formula, that is step 6, in case of the global or total equations, we need to remember that is F equals to KU. Next, in case of step 7, we are having, that is we need to apply the boundary conditions for the given problem. Now in case of the equation 5 in the step 6, the global stiffness matrix, this is a singular matrix because its determinant is equal to 0. In order to remove this singularity problem, certain boundary conditions are applied so that the structure remains in place instead of moving as a rigid body. And the global equation to be modified to account for the boundary conditions of the problem. So that means in the step 7 we need to apply the boundary conditions. Next, in the step 8, the solution for the unknown displacement should be done. So that means a set of simultaneous algebraic equations formed in step 6 can be written in expanded matrix form, which is given here. So the compact form we have seen F equals to KU. In the expanded form it is written here. Now this equation can be solved and unknown displacements U are calculated by using the Gaussian elimination method or Gauss-Seidel method. Next, in case of the step 9, the computation of the element strains and stresses from the nodal displacement should be done. So what you need to do here, that in structural stress analysis problem, stress and strain are important factors. Now from the solution of displacement vector, that is U, stress and strain value need to be calculated. In case of the one-dimensional deformation, the strain displacement relationship is actually given by E equals to du dx, so which we have seen earlier step. So that means this u, it can be written as u2 minus u1, and the dx it can be written as x2 minus x1. So this u1 and u2, these are the displacements at node 1 and node 2, and x2 minus x1, this is actually the actual length of the element. Now from this we can find the strain value. Now if we know the strain value, then the stress value can be calculated by using the relation of the Hooke's law, that is stress sigma, this is equals to Young's modulus into strain. Okay. And lastly, in step 10, we need to interpret the results, which is also known as post-processing step. Now in this post-processing, the analysis and evaluation of the solution results need to be done. So the post-processor computer programs help the user to interpret the results by displaying them in graphical form. So while discussing the software simulation part, we will be able to visualize the different graphical result in the post-processing step. Now this is the flow chart which is given, and the main three different steps, these are pre-processing, analysis and post-processing. And under these three different steps, the total 10 steps are written here in the form of a flowchart which is discussed just now. So the first step under pre-processing, it is the discretization and numbering of nodes and elements. Then under analysis step, we are having the selection of displacement function. Then fourth step, it is the define the material behavior, then derivation of element stiffness matrix and equations, then assemble the element equations, then applying boundary conditions, solution of unknown displacements, computation of the element stresses and strains. Then finally in the post-processing step, we are having the interpretation of the results. Now this discretization that we have discussed earlier, there we have seen four different types of elements. Now the concept of the discretization, it is known to us, that is the art of subdividing a structure into a convenient number of smaller components or smaller elements. It is known as the discretization. After that, these smaller components, these are put together, and the process of uniting the various elements together, it is known as assemblage. Now this assemblage of such elements then represents the original body. Now the discretization, it can be classified again as natural and artificial discretization. Now what is this natural discretization? Now in case of the structural analysis, a strass is considered as a natural system. Now the concept of strass frame, this is already known to us. In engineering mechanics in the first semester, we have studied this concept of the frame and truss. So in structural analysis, a truss is considered as a natural system. The various numbers of the truss constitute the elements. Now these elements are connected as various joints. These are known as the nodes. Now the nodal points, these are actually each kind of finite element has a specific structural shape and is interconnected with the adjacent elements by nodal points or nodes. So in this diagram in figure 1.10, we can see that the different nodes or the nodal points in this natural discretization. In the nodal forces, the forces which act at each nodal point, these are called the nodal forces. Next, we are having the degrees of freedom. The concept of the degrees of freedom, it is already discussed. So when the force or reaction act at nodal point, node is subjected to deformation. Now this deformation includes the displacement, rotation or strain. Now these are collectively known as the degrees of freedom, or we can say the nodal displacement is called the degrees of freedom. Now in this figure 1.10, we can see that this truss consists of 9 elements and 6 nodes. There are 4 freely moving and 2 extreme constraint nodes. The truss is a natural system as there is no possibility either to increase or decrease the number of elements and the nodes. So this is the concept of the natural discretization. Next, we are having the artificial discretization, which is also known as the continuum. A continuum concept, it is actually generally considered to be a single mass of material as found in a forging, then concrete dam, deep beam plate and so on. Now, unlike the truss element which is physically present in the truss, in case of a continuum, the following 3 elements exist only in our imagination. So what are these 3 elements? These are triangular element, rectangular element and quadrilateral element. Now the shapes of these 3 different elements, these are shown here in figure 1.11. The triangular element, rectangular element and the quadrilateral element shapes you can see here. Next, in case of the discretization process, there are different points that we need to consider. First is the type of elements. Now the type of elements to be used will be evident from the physical problem. So here in case of figure 1.18, we can see the original structure and its discretization using the bar elements. So from here we can get an idea what is the discretization means in case of this bar element. Is the finite element idealization can be done by using 3-dimensional rectangular element in stress analysis of short beam problem. Next, the choice of the element to be used for discretization depends upon the following factors. The factors are actually number of degrees of freedom needed, expected accuracy, and the necessary equations required. However, in certain problems, the given structure cannot be discretized by using only one type of element. In such cases, two or more type of elements for discretization we need to use, like aircraft wing. Next, the size of the elements. The size of the elements, it actually influences the convergence of the solution of the problem directly. So it should be chosen with more care. Then if the size of the element is small, then the final solution is more accurate, but the computational time for the smaller size element is more when compared to the larger size element. So this concept, it is also related to the grid independent study in case of the non-structural analysis. So another characteristic related to the size of the elements that affects the finite element problem, it's the aspect ratio of the element. So this aspect ratio, it is defined as the ratio of the largest dimension of the element to the smallest dimension. And the conclusion of many researchers is that the aspect ratio should be close to unity as possible. Now for a two-dimensional rectangular element, it is defined as the length to breadth ratio. So that means the aspect ratio closer to unity, it represents better results. Next, we are having the location of the nodes. Now, if the structure has no abrupt changes in geometry, load, boundary conditions, and material properties, then the structure can be divided into equal subdivisions. So the spacing of the nodes, these are uniform. Now, if there are discontinuities in geometric, load, boundary conditions, and material properties of the structure, in that case, nodes should be introduced at these discontinuities, which is shown here in this diagram 1.22. The geometric discontinuities we can see in the 1.21, and in case of 1.22 we can see the discontinuity, how these are represented. Next, we are having the number of elements. The number of elements to be selected for discretization, it depends on accuracy desired, then size of the elements, and the number of degrees of freedom involved. Now, if the number of elements in the structure is increased, the final solution of the problem is expected to be more accurate. That means the mesh will be denser. But the use of large number of elements, it involves a large number of degrees of freedom, which leads to the storage problem in the available computer memory. So today in this lecture we have discussed the several steps, actually 10 different steps, which is used to solve the numerical of the finite element method. So there we have seen under pre-processing, then analysis, and the post-processing, the 10 different steps have been discussed in details. So these are the steps that we need to follow carefully while solving the problems of the finite element method. So this is the end for this lecture.